Thanks, Peter. Really appreciate the opportunity to share with everyone, and I've been enjoying the best conference and best institute to date. So, first off, the American Council for an Energy Efficient Economy, or ACEEE, is the largest advocacy, research, technical assistance nonprofit, kind of solely focused on energy efficiency in the United States. Our goal is to ensure that energy efficiency is doing everything that it needs to avoid the worst impacts of climate disruption and to center the needs of those who are most overburdened and underserved, who have been historically marginalized in our communities in that process, to ensure that everyone is able to benefit from energy efficiency throughout our economy. To that end, I know you've heard a lot today and yesterday about decarbonization in the built environment, about heat pumps, about electrification. I'm not going to belabor all those points other than to emphasize that, yes, in fact, to avoid the worst impacts of climate disruption, our buildings need to essentially stop burning fossil fuels and move off of fossil fuels, switching to clean electricity to generate the energy to heat, cool our buildings, our appliances, and heat pumps really are the core, both heat pumps for space heating as well as for water heating, and even clothes drying, as well as induction stoves are kind of the four key appliances that need to be employed, with, again, heat pumps for space heating being the most. And this is true not just in the United States, but globally. Across the country, there will be across the world, needs to be a six-fold increase in the deployment of heat pumps in order to meet this challenge globally as well. So kind of going forward, the shift from installing and operating furnaces to efficient heat pumps is kind of the technology, the strategy, the investment that's going to take place in the United States. This is inevitable and necessary at this point. So the question is how to do that most cost effectively, efficiently, and equitably. Just within the United States, getting a little more granular, you're seeing this in a number of states. 20 states, as part of the U.S. Climate Alliance, made a commitment to quadruple the number of heat pumps deployed in their states over the course of the next 10 years. And that's through a wide variety of policies, things like appliance emission standards for space and water heating, building performance standards, clean heat standards, building codes, kind of across the board. Kind of every building policy at this point in these states is shifting to how do we move off fossil fuels into heat pumps. So what does this actually look like when this takes place? So the state of Maryland, as an example, went through this exercise, including publishing a number of reports just last week on this topic. And the Office of People's Counsel, the consumer advocate for the state of Maryland, took a look at what this actually means for the built environment. And the first is essentially you have to meet their climate commitments. You have to stop selling and stop installing gas furnaces as soon as 2025. And so that kind of everything installed from this day forth needs to be a heat pump in order to meet the state's climate targets. That leads to a significant decline in the use of gas across the board in the state in the built environment. What that means, as there are fewer and fewer customers left on the gas system, is that the cost of gas is going to triple or even quadruple over the course of the next 15 years to a quintupling, an increase of 7, 8, 9, 10-fold for those customers that remain behind. Gas is going to get extremely expensive because you have fewer and fewer customers paying for the sunk cost of the gas distribution system. And this is even more stark in places like Maryland, where there's a significant amount of gas pipeline replacement going on in DC and elsewhere. So that's the kind of key driver here going forward, is that the cost of gas is going to skyrocket for those customers who are left behind. So that can't fall on those households that are already most energy burdened in our community. Households earning less than 80% of their area median's income already pay on average, that are burning fossil fuels inside their home, that are on the gas system, already pay on average more than 9% of their income, compared to most of the other households in the United States paying significantly less than that. Those low-income households with these energy burdens are already faced with utility shutoffs, with evictions, pending homelessness as a result of these energy burdens and the cost of housing in their communities. Again, they can't be the last ones on that system that are dealing with those tripling, quadrupling of gas costs over the course of the next few years. So there are 5 strategic policy levers that are needed to ensure that this transition is equitable and efficient. Those include funding comprehensive retrofits for low-income households specifically, having a transition policy off the gas system that is strategic, equitable, and efficient. That includes consumer and tenant protections in this transition so that housing costs don't increase as these retrofits take place. It also ensures ensuring resilience from the extreme impacts of climate events, as well as ensuring that there is wealth built and economic inclusion for communities that have been historically marginalized, overburdened, and underserved. So let's dive into those a little bit, starting with comprehensive retrofits. It's very important that the retrofits that take place are comprehensive, that they include health and safety repairs, efficiency, and electrification. That tremendously lowers the cost of the electrification transition for individual households and for the system as a whole, making sure that as we electrify and shift to heat pumps, that we're doing insulation, envelope, air sealing, all of the kind of things that can lower customers' costs in this transition and lower system costs of that transition. To reach those kind of comprehensive retrofits, again, health and safety repairs, efficiency, and electrification altogether, you're looking at an average cost of around $25,000 to $30,000 per household. There are 26 million low-income households in the United States today burning fossil fuels. So we need about $800 billion to ensure that low-income households can achieve these comprehensive retrofits first and foremost. So over the next decade, we need to mobilize $800 billion to make this happen. That means braiding and stacking dozens of different funding sources, state, federal, local, utility, all of these different funding sources have to be leveraged and braided and stacked together in order to accomplish that goal. So let's talk about some of the federal funding sources that are now available because of the Inflation Reduction Act and the bipartisan infrastructure law for these type of retrofits. So on the electrification side, there's $4.5 billion now in the home electrification rebates that is currently, states are putting forth their applications over the next few months, including some that are quick starting to launch those home electrification rebates. There's also the 25C home improvement tax credit available for those with a tax appetite. For heat pumps, we're talking about a significant amount of money per heat pump, more than $2,000, as well as for whole home retrofits, I'll get into in a moment, the 25C tax credit is available not just for heat pumps, but also for some of those insulation, air sealing investments as well. There's also the home energy rebates, separate from the home electrification rebates. Similarly, again, a little over $4 billion going to the states that will be available for low-income households. Again, the higher credit for low-income households. Let me actually just jump back on the electrification rebates for a moment to note that those rebates are available only to those under 150% of their area median income. And again, similarly for those under 80% of their area median income, those amounts are, those eligible amounts are increased. But states can also go further and restrict those rebates further depending on what they want to do to really target those rebates to, again, households earning less than 80% of their area median income. The Green and Resilient Retrofit Program has been putting out money throughout the course of this year. It has more than $1 billion through HUD for HUD-assisted housing, privately assisted housing, not public housing. And those there's been a rolling application process for the Green and Resilient Retrofit Program, again, over the last few months. The Weatherization Assistance Program had its funding more than doubled through the bipartisan infrastructure law. Again, a key source of braiding and stacking funding for insulation, air sealing, envelope improvements to be paired with some of the electrification funding that's available now, as well as through state and utility programs. And finally, on the commercial building side, multifamily building side, there's also the 179D tax credit that can be used primarily for new buildings as well as retrofits of existing buildings for achieving significant energy savings, 25 to 50%, again, with a sliding scale in terms of getting much higher levels of tax deductions, the deeper energy savings that are achieved. On new buildings, in addition to the 179D commercial building and multifamily building tax credit that I just mentioned, there's also a huge amount of money for building code improvement and investment. Just in the last week or two, we saw the next round of innovative building code funding coming from the Department of Energy. That includes moving to zero codes. We also just saw this week the White House and the Department of Energy propose a definition for what is a zero energy building. And if you haven't checked out that definition, definitely do. It could set the groundwork for a lot of those policies that I was talking about in terms of what needs to be achieved. There's kind of three major elements. One is significant energy efficiency and energy savings, no on-site emissions, so no combustion of fuels on-site that create health and climate damaging pollution, and purchasing clean electricity that is above and beyond minimum regulatory requirements in those states. Then there's the 45L new energy efficient home tax credit, significant amount for achieving Energy Star, zero energy ready home levels. One of the great things about the 45L tax credit, it was also is now stackable with the low income housing tax credit, or LIHTC, so that it can really reach low income households. So for new building, it just makes sense to build all new homes to those Energy Star, zero energy ready, certainly zero energy ready home levels. We've actually seen the largest manufactured housing company in the United States, Clayton Homes, commit to achieving those zero energy ready homes on all of their manufactured homes going forward, because it just pencils out for households when you factor in that $5,000 tax credit. There's also broad funding programs available now, including the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund. There were 5 entities that applied for what's called the NCIF, the National Clean Investment Fund, that to distribute more than $12 billion at a national level. Most of those proposals were very focused on funding low-income and disadvantaged community housing retrofits. So that's a huge other source of funding that the EPA will be deciding which entities will be distributing that funding over the course of the next few months by March. There's also the climate pollution reduction grants, very flexible funding from the EPA for a number of different things that states can propose. There are states proposing to use some of that funding and cities proposing to use some of that funding for building retrofits as well. And not to mention the environmental and climate justice block grants. I didn't mention the energy efficiency community block grants. There's a whole lot of funding available now that will be moving through states and cities over the course of the next few months and can be braided and stacked to enable this transition to take place. The vast majority of those funds should be going to low-income households, working within each community to figure out how to make that happen. One thing we're particularly excited about here at ACEEE is the Buildings Upgrade Prize, where more than 40 communities have been selected to receive funding from the Department of Energy for advancing building retrofits, comprehensive programs focused on particularly underserved communities, affordable housing most prominently. So there are new opportunities for kind of what are called one-stop shops, where are energy navigators, where there are community-based organizations and cities working together to ensure that all of these different funds can be aligned, braided, and stacked easily for low-income households to be able to navigate all of the challenges of going through a retrofit process. I also want to talk briefly about strategic electrification, about gas transition, making sure that we're actually transitioning off the gas system on a neighborhood by neighborhood basis, or rather than just kind of individual home by individual home. That is by far the most cost-effective way to wind down the gas system so that we're not constantly in a process of repairing and replacing pipes. That can really reduce the cost of the transition by figuring out how do we enable these retrofits on an entire neighborhood basis so that you can shut down a portion of the gas system and not have to continue to invest in repairing and replacing that gas distribution system. We also need to just stop making the problem worse. So stop subsidizing the installation of fossil fuels, ending gas line extensions where utilities pay thousands of dollars for new homes to hook up to the gas system, ending incentives for efficient fossil fuel appliances in the name of energy efficiency. With the new Department of Energy appliance standards, there's no reason to, that Marianne was just talking about, there's no reason to continue to subsidize and incentivize the installation of fossil fuel appliances. We can move to, we've talked about appliance emission standards, all electric new construction, and again, starting that managed transition off the gas distribution system is the most cost-effective, efficient, and equitable way to go about this. Making sure that energy and housing bills go down through things like limiting electricity costs in this transition. We've seen a number of states now propose new rate structures, including percentage of income payment programs, to make electricity bills more affordable in this transition. As well as making sure that there are consumer and tenant protections so that landlords can't just install new appliances, make a retrofit happen, and then kick out low-income housing tenants. So there are some restrictions on how quickly and that low-income households and tenants need to be kept in the home for at least more than 2 years, 3 years in the case of the Department of Energy's rebates. But communities can go much further to ensure that there's not displacement and gentrification as a result of these investments. We've seen examples of that in California with the LIWIP program, includes income eligibility requirements, covenants for 10 years. Maryland uses 5 years. There's a sliding scale in some cases based on the amount of investment that's given. Massachusetts uses a sliding scale for the higher the investment in a multifamily program home, the longer the period of time that the affordability covenants need to remain. And then on resilience, climate events, flooding, wildfires, these extreme events are probably the biggest threat to the integrity of our housing system and to the financial system, largely backed by the government-sponsored enterprises, the Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, as well as HUD, USDA, and VA. About 75% of all new homes in the United States of America today are actually backed by the federal government or those federally backed enterprises. And the threat of destruction of those homes, of the extreme weather, if there's a power outage, literally killing people because they can't survive in their home. Building codes make these, and both building codes for new buildings reaching zero codes, also retrofits, increase the resilience of homes, literally keeping people alive during these extreme weather events, because you can actually stay inside your home longer. The more efficient it is, the more up-to-date those building codes are. The households are more likely to survive these extreme weather events by making our homes more resilient and meeting up-to-date energy and resilience codes. And finally, making sure that each one of these programs, all of this transition builds wealth within underserved communities, making sure that workers, community members who have been historically marginalized and unable to access some of the jobs in the retrofit market and the energy efficiency market can actually reach and receive the benefits from the work that is going to be taking place. So workforce development programs, apprenticeship programs are great ways to make sure that the workforce is developing in a way that includes, again, these historically marginalized communities, the communities where these retrofits are actually taking place. With that, we'll open it up for questions, and would also be remiss if I didn't highlight more opportunities that ACEEE is hosting to discuss these things, to dive deeper, including our hot air and hot water forums, our summer study on efficiency buildings, also known as summer camp for buildings nerds, and our energy efficiency policy forum in the fall after the election. Do we have any questions, Peter?
Yes, we do have some questions, and we have kind of a three-part question related to, first of all, what is the uptake of these programs so far? Secondly, is there a roadmap of programs that are available? And third, are there any organizations that are helping low-income people navigate all of these programs, eligibility, lenders, etc.? And that question is from Robin McClellan.
Yep, absolutely. So I mentioned the Buildings Upgrade Prize and those more than 40 winners. There are community organizations and national organizations that are doing a great job helping different stakeholders, low-income households navigate these different funding streams. But the more we can see those one-stop shops develop, the better off we're all going to be. And so I'll put in the, or we can share afterwards, kind of almost every state in the country had a winner of the Buildings Upgrade Prize. We also see folks like, give you an example of Built to Last in Philadelphia, Green and Healthy Homes Initiative, who's active in a number of states, your community action agencies. A lot of different stakeholders are helping navigate these challenges. As far as the rebates themselves, the rebates haven't rolled out yet. So we don't yet have best practices, but there are a number of best practices from utility efficiency programs, California, New York, pilot programs in Massachusetts and elsewhere that have really been doing a great job of figuring out how to roll out these programs for low-income households. I mentioned Built to Last in Philadelphia. Elevate in the Midwest does a great job. As well as I mentioned, LIWIP, the Association for Energy Affordability, AEA in New York and California. Happy to share all these afterwards and resources for these groups that are helping navigate and implement these best practices.
So, and is there any data on uptake of these programs so far?
As I meant, as far as utility programs, there's a tremendous amount of data. Check out ACEEE. We run scorecards for both states and utilities on uptake. But again, for the rebates, they haven't rolled out yet. So can't really talk about uptake yet. They're relatively recent.
Okay. And another question, and we're going to have to interpret this a little bit from Bob Clark. Since 43.7% of electricity is generated by natural gas in Maryland, will the power generation companies be held to the same standards? And I think you'll have to interpret that question a little bit because obviously we have to decarbonize the grid, and how are we doing that as we go along?
Yeah, and actually the electric sector has been subject to far more of these types of transition requirements than the gas distribution side has. So in fact, between state of Maryland, for instance, you have the renewable portfolio standard, you have new proposals for 100% clean electricity standards, you have the regional greenhouse gas initiative. That's true for a number of states in the Northeast and Mid-Atlantic. And again, RPSs have been in place in most states now in the country for a long period. So in fact, the electric sector has been subject to these standards in this transition effort and has been, again, far more extensively than the gas distribution system. So now that it's time, as the electric system has become far cleaner, that is absolutely the core. And I spent most of my career working on the electricity system, making sure that it did decarbonize so that it can provide the foundation for electrifying buildings, transportation, industry. That really now is the core that the progress that we've made in the electric sector needs to be made for gas distribution, for industry, and for transportation.
And I think as time goes on, gas will become prohibitively expensive to continue to use. And will that impact the business model of the natural gas providers?
Unquestionably, yep. And that's going to be a major driver going forward. Is if you're a building owner or developer, you need to be planning for a significant increase in gas going forward, the same as true as for in the electric sector as well. It looks like we're out of time.